From Alberta's stake in Chinese trade developments to the impact the China deal could have on Team Canada dynamics and questions around where Pierre Poilievre might run next. Time now for tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Chaldeans Mensah, newly retired political science faculty member at MacEwan University, and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity, longtime broadcast journalist in Alberta. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with what we heard from the CEO of Invest Alberta on his involvement in the Carney trade mission to China. Chaldeans, how much of the dialogue around that mission has focused, obviously on tariffs and electric vehicle concessions, but what's your read on the degree to which our province actually factors into the bigger trade and investment outcome?
Michael, I think Alberta factors highly in the outcome of this trade mission. I think the Chinese are going to make room to import agricultural products, canola, beef, pork. So Alberta farmers are going to be winners, and Saskatchewan also is going to be a big winner. But clearly, this strategic partnership of Mr. Carney with China is going to open export opportunities for our agricultural producers. But it's also going to cause strain in other parts of Canada, because in Ontario, the premier there is not very happy of the impact of the EVs on auto workers.
Don, we're obviously picking up on some of this conversation, but surprised that there isn't more dialogue around how Alberta stands to fare in the wake of this federal trade mission.
Well, this opens up, listening to the conversation prior to our conversation, a whole bunch of doors that haven't been opened up in decades. I want to harken back and to do a bit of a history lesson in the lead up to the Free Trade Association we have with the United States of America. And that was at the time we have Mr. Mulroney, Brian Mulroney, and John Turner, who was the leader of the Liberal Party at that time. And it's a famous exchange between the two in the lead up to an election and about free trade. And that was Mr. Turner was warning exactly what we just heard a few moments ago. When you marry your supplier, as it was with the United States, well, things might go south pretty fast if you're not too careful, and here we are. So Mr. Turner's ideas and what he was warning about, now here we are. Mr. Mulroney, meantime, had something to say for prime ministers that followed him. Now, Mr. Mulroney is gone, but he said the prime minister's number one job was to maintain national unity. Whoa, that's going to be interesting next week with Doug Ford being a little bit upset with Mr. Carney. And the second job, Mr. Mulroney said, that the Prime Minister had was maintaining a relationship, and a good relationship, with the United States of America. So that's coming up over the next little while. And in Alberta, we seem to be looking at a World Trade Association that's generally about the world.
Chaldeans, before we get to that unity element that Don just brought up, what do you think Albertans should really be watching for now, where Chinese investment in this province is concerned? How much do you think that pipeline is on the radar?
I think the concern that Albertans and generally also Canadians should watch out for is that Chinese are very sensitive on some topics, and they could easily pull the rug under us if we stray. So there has to be a bit of caution in terms of how we deal with the Chinese. But clearly, there are opportunities in the oil and gas sector for Chinese investment. A new pipeline to the West Coast, I think the Chinese are going to be very much interested in that. So there is an opening, and I hope that the Premier, working in concert with the federal government, will maybe travel again to China and see how we can build up kind of momentum on investment. But Michael, at the same time, we have to be cautious also not to damage our relationship with the United States. They are our number one trader. They, $3 billion plus dollars cross the border every day, and therefore we have to be careful to nurture that relationship as we also open strategically to other markets.
All right. While Alberta is looking to benefit from the trade mission to China, balance trade issues south of the border, reaction elsewhere could make for some interesting team dynamics.
Support companies that are building vehicles here. It's as simple as that. This is a Team Canada approach. We got to stick together.
Ontario's discontent over the Carney delegation making a deal that allows for up to 49,000 Chinese-made electric vehicles into Canada annually, a concession for China easing those tariffs on canola and other ag products. It's a conversation sure to come up with the PM when First Ministers meet in Ottawa next week. Don, how do you see Doug Ford's pushback playing in the wake of the China trade mission? Is there more here than just a premier expressing frustration over how his province might fare?
Well, he's got a terrible, terrible problem because ever since the early 1960s, when the first auto pact was put together with the United States, in the sense that we have what we now have, these free and easy exchange of parts and car parts and all the other stuff that goes. This has been going on, like I said, since the early 60s, and suddenly this is falling apart in almost like it seems like seconds. The second thing, I'm going to go sideways for just a second here. And let's not forget that the president of the United States said we don't need Canadian cars. So why would he say that in Michigan, of all places? Well, it turns out that in Michigan, there were a lot of voters that did not vote for the Republican Party, and they just also happened to be working in auto plants. So there's politics involved here, no doubt. About building electric EVs in Canada, well, again, Doug Ford had a terrible problem. They invested heavily in a battery plant. How did that go? So I don't know what's in play here, but all we know is that we can't go back to where we were because that's not where we are anymore. I'll leave it at that.
Well, and Chaldeans, at this stage, how important is unity around the Team Canada table? How uncomfortable a discussion do you anticipate it could well be 1 week from today?
Well, Michael, I think we have to avoid this kind of artificiality, trying to create a sense of unity when there are actually real concerns in certain provinces in terms of how we approach trade. I recall that when our Premier, Daniel Smith, was trying to cooperate and open up to the United States and Trump, he faced backlash from Mr. Ford, calling for a Team Canada approach. Now the shoe is on the other foot. He wants to protect auto workers in Ontario. But clearly, he needs to align himself with the team in terms of making sure that we have a cohesive approach to the U.S. challenge and also opening up new markets. So I'm hoping that you slow down some of his criticism, work with the other premiers and the federal government, and come up with a common approach that protects our auto workers. I think the federal government has to come up with some arrangement to help these workers. But I think he is to be on board on a Team Canada as we face this challenge from both the United States and China. These are the issues that Mr. Carney raised in his Davos speech.
All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. When we come back, though, questions around where Pierre Poilievre might run next. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. There may be an added dimension to discussions when federal Conservatives gather in Calgary at the end of the month for Pierre Poilievre's leadership review. That is because of news reports the Conservative leader will not run in Battle River Crowfoot in the next election, the Alberta riding he won in last year's by-election after losing his own Ontario seat in April. Damien Kirk, the previous MP for Battle River Crowfoot, is now said to be the Conservatives' candidate whenever Canadians next go to the polls. Chaldeans surprised Pierre Poilievre would not stick with running again in this Alberta riding?
Yeah, a bit of a surprise, Michael. But I think there are two forces at work here. The first is that the Carleton riding, where he ran for over a decade, he won the Carleton riding for 10 years, and he was defeated in the last election. It looks like things are changing in that particular riding. The federal workers in that riding are unhappy with the cutbacks by the Carney government. So maybe there's a bit of political movement, and he wants to maybe exploit it in the next election. So that is one option, a possibility. Another possibility is that maybe he doesn't want to be identified too much with the separatist sentiment that we have in this province. The Battle River Crowfoot area is a strong, base for that kind of sentiment. And so he wants to win in Ontario, Quebec, and other places. I think he doesn't want to be too closely associated with that separatism. So perhaps maybe he's moving out now in the hope to not damage his image in the next election.
Don, where do you think this leaves constituents in Battle River Crowfoot? What's the risk of this maybe ruffling some feathers?
Well, I want to echo what Chaldeans was saying just a moment ago, is that it's wise for the leader of the royal opposition, the loyal opposition, to distance himself from a sovereignty movement, which seems to have gathering a lot of momentum in central Alberta. So that's wise in a way. And also, that's a safe riding that you could run just about anybody there. And Damien was a nice guy and moved aside with the idea that he'd come back in. But what this presents is a much bigger question that is the elephant in the room, if we could just put this. Do we really expect Mr. Poilievre to be the leader of the loyal opposition 2 weeks from now? Maybe he will be. Will he be leading a conservative force that is going to be equal to what Mr. Carney's been doing around the world? Lots of questions around that one. So in some cases, this might be moot in the sense of where he runs, because he may not be able to run as the leader, but certainly he might be able to run somewhere in the country. I think right now the Conservatives next week have to have that long, dark night of the soul and ask themselves some questions about what happened over the last year. The Liberal Party of Canada completely co-opted our platform and made it their own. So how do we move past that? One way past it might be what the Liberals did, was to get a new leader. And we'll find out what that is all about in the weeks to come.
Okay, so Chaldeans, how do you see this setting up for next week's CPC convention and, of course, the leadership review for Pierre Poilievre?
Michael, it is a critical convention for the leader. People will be watching the numbers when the votes are counted. The Ralph Klein threshold of 75% is a number to look out for. If Mr. Poilievre fails to get above 75%, it will be a signal that the party wants a change of leadership. And I think that his larger problem is that he has to break through to the broader population beyond his base. I think his approach hasn't been working. His kind of attack dog approach. So he needs a change of approach. If he wins it and attempt to bring home voters that are not comfortable with his style, and that is going to be the major challenge. But I think next week is critical. He has to win, in my mind, 75% or above to have any sense of continue to rule, continue to be the leader of the party.
And Don, what message do you feel he needs to bring, Pierre Poilievre needs to bring to the podium, if it is that he is to continue on as leader?
Well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't wish that upon him, because he spent his whole career being who he is. And let's be very frank. He's very, very good at what he does in terms of the barking dog in the room. And I don't mean that to be mean. I'm just saying is if there's something wrong here, folks, maybe you should check. Maybe there's a bad guy outside the door and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, okay? But I don't know what he can do and what he can say at this point. But what he does need to do and say is to the members of his caucus that he is not going to let you cross the floor and become Liberals, because the Liberals now have the best Conservative Prime Minister in the country, in Mark Carney.
Well, and they're all returning to the House of Commons next week. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
nice
you
to see
very
you,
much,
Chaldeans.
Bye.